was a quiet day on Earth, but that would soon change forever. The peaceful hum of cities, the calm in the streets, and the rhythm of daily life were shattered by a sudden, unexpected event. One by one, the communications systems went silent. No news, no messages, nothing. Then, without warning, a single broadcast filled every screen across the planet. Freezing the world in shock, the message was simple, but terrifying. The aliens, who called themselves the Zalorians, were coming. They had been watching humanity for centuries, waiting for the right moment. And now, they demanded that humanity surrender or face annihilation. Their message was clear: submit, or we will bring destruction like you have never seen. People sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what they had just heard. The Zalorians were a species so far beyond human technology that it seemed impossible to fight back. Their ships could block out the stars, and their weapons were said to tear through planets. The words of their leader echoed in the minds of the terrified people. "We have come to claim what is ours. You have 2 weeks. Surrender now, or face total destruction." The world's leaders scrambled to respond, but the situation was unlike anything anyone had ever imagined. Meetings were held behind closed doors, and emergency broadcasts were sent to every corner of the globe. There was panic, confusion, and fear. The best minds of Earth came together in a desperate attempt to find a way to deal with the Zalorian threat. Among them was General Lucas Keller, a seasoned military leader known for his cool head in the most intense situations. He stood at the front of a room filled with some of the most powerful people on Earth. But this time, even his experience couldn't calm the fear in the air. "What do we do now?" the president asked, her voice shaking. "These aliens, they're not just any invaders. They're capable of wiping us out in an instant." General Keller looked out of the window at the skyline, his mind racing. He had seen enemies come and go, but nothing compared to the Zalorians. They weren't just a military force. They were a force of nature. And they wanted Earth. The stakes couldn't be higher. "The first thing we do is stay calm," Keller replied, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. "We need to understand what we're up against. This is not just about fighting them. This is about survival." Around him, leaders from all nations began speaking, their words filled with panic and fear. "We can't fight them. They're too advanced. We need to negotiate, to beg for mercy." But General Keller knew one thing. The Zalorians didn't come to negotiate. They didn't want peace. They wanted control. And no amount of begging would change that. As the hours passed, the world's leaders turned to Earth's brightest mind scientists, engineers, and strategists for help. There was only one question on everyone's mind: how could humanity survive this? The Zalorians were offering no room for diplomacy. They had come to conquer, and they had the power to do it. Deep within a secure underground facility, a group of scientists worked tirelessly to find a way to defend Earth. Dr. Evelyn Grant, a leading physicist, led the team. She had studied alien technology for years, but the Zalorians were unlike anything she had ever seen. Their technology seemed beyond the limits of human understanding. "Is there any hope?" one of the scientists asked, looking up at Dr. Grant. She paused, staring at the screen in front of her. "We can't give up. We have to try." Meanwhile, across the globe, ordinary people were beginning to feel the effects of the alien threat. Panic spread like wildfire. People rushed to stores to stock up on supplies, while others gathered in groups, praying for a miracle. The fear was everywhere. No one knew what to expect. Would the Zalorians land and begin their attack? Would they destroy cities with a single blow? At the same time, strange things began happening. UFO sightings were reported around the world. Bright lights flashed in the sky, and eerie noises filled the air. No one could explain what was going on, but everyone knew one thing: the Zalorians were coming, and they weren't interested in peace. General Keller and the world's leaders were running out of time. The deadline given by the Zalorians was fast approaching. 2 weeks, just 2 weeks to prepare for the worst. The stakes were rising with every passing second. In those moments of fear and uncertainty, humanity began to realize that they couldn't wait for someone else to save them. They would have to find a way to save themselves. But how? How could they possibly stand against an enemy so powerful? As the countdown to destruction began, one question remained: would humanity surrender, or would they fight back? The clock was ticking. The world had just received the most terrifying ultimatum in its history. For days, the leaders of Earth debated, analyzed, and fought to find a solution. The time was slipping away, and fear was turning into something darker: desperation. With the Zalorian deadline looming, a global summit was called, and the fate of the planet hung in the balance. General Lucas Keller stood before the world's leaders once more. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him as they waited for his next words. Everyone was aware of the Zalorians' power, their invincibility. People began to doubt that anything could stop them. Humanity's fate seemed sealed, but Keller wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He had been through battles that seemed unwinnable, but something told him that this was different. This wasn't just about military strength or advanced technology. It was about survival. He knew that if humanity surrendered, it would be the end. But if they fought, they would be risking everything. "Gentlemen, ladies," Keller began, his voice firm and steady. "The Zalorians think we are weak, that we will crumble before their might. But I'm telling you, we can't give them that satisfaction. If we surrender, we may as well sign our death certificates. We fight or we die. It's as simple as that." There was a long silence in the room, and for the first time, Keller noticed that the world's leaders weren't looking at him with fear. They were looking at him with determination. Maybe they were starting to understand. Maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance. As Keller spoke, scientists across the globe worked tirelessly to uncover a solution. Dr. Evelyn Grant, who had been studying alien technologies for years, had an idea, risky one, but one that could give Earth a fighting chance. What if humanity could turn the Zalorian technology against them? What if they could hack into their systems and use their own weapons against them? Grant gathered a team of experts and began working in secret. The pressure was on. She knew the risks involved. The Zalorians had tech far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. If they were caught, humanity would lose its one chance of survival. The plan was dangerous. It was fragile. But if they succeeded, it could be their only hope. In parallel, Keller's forces were preparing for war, stockpiling weapons, and preparing to mobilize. But the Zalorians were always one step ahead. Their ships were already in Earth's orbit, watching, waiting. Humanity's time was running out. The hours became days. The countdown to the Zalorian ultimatum was getting dangerously close. Earth's military leaders knew there was no time left for diplomacy, and no time left for fear. The decision was made. Earth would not submit. An emergency broadcast was aired to every nation, showing images of the approaching Zalorian fleet. The announcement was brief but clear. Humanity will not surrender. We will fight. As the broadcast ended, sense of unity swept across the globe. People who had been fearful of what might come now knew what they had to do. Governments were no longer divided by politics. They were united by a common cause. The world was preparing for war, but it wasn't just about the fight, it was about pride. Humanity would no longer be seen as the weak, vulnerable species. They would show the Zalorians the true strength of the human spirit. In the shadows of war preparations, Dr. Grant and her team continued to refine their risky plan. They had discovered something remarkable. The Zalorians had weaknesses that could be exploited. A massive energy source within their ships, a single vulnerability in their advanced weapons systems, and an opening in their communication network. If they could get close enough, if they could breach their defenses, they might have a chance. The plan was crazy, and everyone knew it. It required courage that most humans didn't even know they had. But it was their only chance. General Keller, now overseeing the war effort, stood tall before his soldiers. He could see the fear in their eyes, but he could also see something else: hope. The soldiers weren't just afraid of the Zalorians anymore. They were ready to fight for their families, their homes, and their way of life. They were ready to stand their ground. Keller had never seen anything like this before. Humanity, united as one, was about to face a force unlike anything it had ever seen. But he didn't see it as hopeless. In that moment, he saw something that the Zalorians hadn't. Counted Anna's spark of defiance. "We have one shot at this," Keller said, his voice strong. "We fight for our future. We fight for Earth. And no matter what happens, we will show them that humanity doesn't kneel." And so the battle began. A battle that would decide not just the future of Earth, but the future of humanity itself. As Earth prepared for war, the countdown to the Zalorians' ultimatum continued. The world's leaders, the scientists, the soldiers, and every person on Earth now had one goal in mind: survival. The war had begun, and humanity would not go down without a fight. The first shot was fired in the dead of night. A single, piercing beam of light shot through the atmosphere and struck the Earth's surface with such force that it sent shock waves across entire continents. It wasn't just an attack. It was a statement. The Zalorians had arrived. Across the world, people stared up at the skies in terror. Cities went dark. The air was thick with fear. For the first time, humanity was facing a real enemy force, so powerful that their mere presence bent the very laws of nature. Their ships, massive and intimidating, floated in the sky like dark gods ready to bring judgment. The aliens' relentless firepower instantly decimated military bases and communication towers around the world, but humanity wasn't ready to give up. No one had expected to survive this battle, but against all odds, there was a fierce determination. In the hearts of Earth's people, refusal to go down without fighting back. General Keller watched as the chaos unfolded. He stood in a war room filled with flashing lights and the hum of emergency signals. His mind raced through the strategies and tactics he had prepared. But there was something different in the air now. This wasn't just about military plans. It was about survival, about fighting for a future that could disappear in an instant. "General," a voice said, breaking his thoughts. It was Captain Maria Vega, one of Keller's most trusted officers. She stood with a map of the world's battle, tracing the lines of communication and military engagement. "We've got major losses across Europe and Asia. They're attacking in waves. But our forces are still holding strong in the Pacific," she reported. Keller nodded. his jaw tight. The Pacific was their last line of defense, the last remaining hope. The Zalorians had spread their forces thin, but humanity had never faced such overwhelming odds. The battle wasn't just about firepower, it was about willpower. And now, that would be put to the test. "Hold them as long as you can," Keller ordered, his voice unwavering. "We're counting on Dr. Grant's plan. It's our only shot." Far from the battlefield, deep within the heart of a hidden bunker, Dr. Evelyn Grant and her team were working tirelessly. They had identified the weak points in the Zalorian ships, but now they had to exploit them. A network of satellites, once used for peaceful purposes, was now being reprogrammed to assist in the counterattack. Grant's fingers flew over the keyboard as she coordinated with ground teams. The data was streaming in faster than they could process it, but there was a flicker of hope. They had found an opening away to hack into the Zalorian communication systems. If they could interrupt their command network, it could cause confusion among the invaders. But there was no time for mistakes. The first wave of Zalorian assault ships broke through Earth's outer defenses with ruthless precision. The sounds of explosions rocked the cities below as they began to unleash their devastating energy weapons. Humanity's military responded in kind, launching every fighter, missile, and defense mechanism they had. But each attack seemed useless against the alien might. Still, humanity fought back with everything they had. Soldiers held their ground, civilians fled to underground bunkers, and resistance fighters began to form guerrilla units to take on the aliens in the streets. In the Pacific, a fleet of human warships engaged the Zalorian flagship, an enormous vessel that dwarfed anything Earth had ever built. Its surface was covered in thick alien armor, nearly impervious to anything they could throw at it. The human fleet's weapons seemed like nothing more than sparks against the giant beast. But then, something unexpected happened. The flagship's shield flickered. For a split second, there was a gap just long enough for the humans to take aim. The ships fired their weapons at once, releasing a barrage of missiles, each one packed with enough force to level a city. The missiles struck the flagship's vulnerable spot, tearing a massive hole into the alien ship's hull. The battle was far from over. But, for the first time since the war began, humanity had struck a blow. The Zalorians had underestimated the resilience of their enemy, and as the human fleet circled their damaged flagship, preparing for another strike, Keller felt a flicker of hope. But that hope came with a heavy price. The Zalorians retaliated instantly, using their advanced energy weapons to obliterate several human ships. The response was swift, brutal, and terrifying. Back on Earth, the situation was just as dire. Entire cities were reduced to rubble in moments. The alien weapons struck with the power of meteors, causing mass casualties. Yet, humanity's will remained unbroken. The survivors, many of them displaced and terrified, began to fight back in ways no one had ever expected. Resistance groups formed in the shadows, waging guerrilla warfare against the alien invaders, using the environment and whatever they could find as weapons. Every day, it seemed like Earth was on the brink of collapse. But every day, humanity found a way to push back, to keep going, to keep fighting. In the midst of it all, Dr. Grant and her team worked relentlessly. They were on the edge of success. They had cracked the Zalorian communication network and discovered something crucial, a way to break into their central command system. If they could disrupt the Zalorians' fleet communication, it could buy Earth the time it needed to finish the fight. But it wasn't going to be easy. The clock was ticking, the battle was intensifying, and the Zalorians were growing more ruthless. With every passing moment, humanity had taken a small step in the right direction, but there was still a long road ahead, and the cost of victory would be higher than anyone could imagine. The world had descended into chaos. Every corner of Earth felt the weight of the war, from the smoldering ruins of cities to the desperate attempts of civilians to escape. But despite the overwhelming power of the Zalorian invasion, something remarkable began to happen. Humanity, backed into a corner and on the brink of collapse, discovered the depths of its resilience. The fight was no longer about survival, it was about revenge. General Keller paced the command center, his mind spinning. They had managed to land a few strikes, sure, but it was nothing compared to the full might of the Zalorian fleet. Yet, there was something about the way the humans fought that made the alien commanders nervous. The battle wasn't over, not yet. He grabbed a communicator and spoke in a low, urgent tone. "This is it. We launch everything we have. Dr. Grant's team has found a way. We strike now, or we never get another chance." Across the globe, humanity's last stand began. There was no room for failure. All remaining military forces were marshaled into one final effort, a desperate assault to destroy the Zalorian. RMADA. Dr. Grant's voice crackled through the comms as her team began to execute their plan. "We've hacked into their command system. Now we need to keep them from realizing it until it's too late." Humanity had discovered something no one had expected. There was a flaw in the Zalorians' communication structure. While their technology was advanced, it was not impervious. Dr. Grant's team had been working around the clock to exploit that weakness. They'd learned that if they could send a false signal deep into the Zalorian command network, they could cause a catastrophic system-wide failure. The aliens wouldn't be able to communicate with each other or their fleets. In that moment, they'd be blind. Keller watched as Earth's last line of defense began to mobilize. The ships were ready. The weapons were charged. The final assault was underway. The Zalorian fleet hovered in the sky, their massive ships blocking out the stars. From the ground, people gazed up in terror, knowing the end could come at any moment. Yet, there was an unexpected calm as well. Some believed humanity was about to make its final stand. Others were simply numb to the destruction that had already ravaged their world. And then, it happened. Without warning. Every communication signal across the Zalorian fleet turned to static. Their vast network of control systems began to flicker and spark, unable to process the flood of false signals flooding in. Within moments, confusion spread across their ships like wildfire. Humanity had just gained the one thing they'd been fighting for, an opening. The first missile was launched. A sleek, deadly projectile that arced through the air toward the largest Zalorian ship, the one commanding the entire fleet. It hit its target with surgical precision, causing an explosion so intense that it illuminated the sky like the sun itself. The shock wave was felt across the planet. The Zalorian flagship began to spiral out of control, its once impenetrable shields failing in a violent surge. The alien fleet, already reeling from the attack, started to disintegrate under the weight of human firepower. The soldiers on Earth could feel the momentum shifting, but the Zalorians weren't giving up so easily. As soon as their systems began to stabilize, they retaliated with everything they had left. The remaining ships launched devastating energy blasts that scorched Earth's surface, causing massive earthquakes and tsunamis, turning entire cities into dust. Yet, humanity did not relent. Each counterattack, each move was calculated, determined. People all over the world, in their final moments of hope, stood strong. Resistance forces were now scattered across the earth, using guerrilla tactics to fight back, attacking supply lines and weak spots in the alien command structure. The destruction was brutal, but there was something beautiful about the way humanity had refused to yield. Back in space, Dr. Grant's team watched as their efforts began to show results. The Zalorians were losing their grip on their fleet. The confusion was spreading. With their communication systems broken, the Zalorian ships were now firing blindly. Their once impressive technology, now their greatest weakness. Their ship is losing power. One of the team members shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. We're doing it. We're actually winning. For a moment, it seemed like a miracle. The impossible was becoming real. But just as it seemed like the tide was turning in humanity's favor, a new threat emerged from the shadows. The warlord, a towering figure of terror and destruction, emerged from the heart of their command ship. His face was a mask of fury, and his rage was palpable. The warlord wasn't about to let humanity win not so easily. He rallied the remaining fleet with a roar that reverberated through the communication channels, rallying them for one final push. The last of the Zalorian warships, massive and terrifying, charged straight toward Earth, their weapons fully charged for the final obliteration. It was their last attack. The Zalorians would either crush humanity, or humanity would find a way to wipe them out once and for all. The clock was ticking. Humanity's final hope lay in the hands of General Keller and his forces, who were prepared for the last, most dangerous battle of all. As the alien warlord's ship descended upon Earth, humanity's resolve never faltered. It was no longer about fighting to survive. It was about fighting for the future of the planet. In a final, desperate move, Keller ordered the full release of Earth's final weapon that had been kept hidden until the very end. Power was unparalleled, and it was the only thing left that could truly destroy the Zalorian invaders. With a flash brighter than the sun, the weapon fired. The alien warlord's ship, and everything around it, was obliterated in a single, massive blast. Humanity had won. But at a cost. The dust was settling, but the echoes of battle still lingered. In the air, humanity stood victorious, but the price of survival was etched in every corner of Earth. Cities lay in ruins. Countless lives had been lost, and the skies, once bright with the promise of a peaceful future, were now scarred by the remains of the alien invasion. General Keller stood atop a broken building, his eyes scanning the horizon. The alien fleet was no more. The Zalorians had been defeated, but the cost was impossible to measure. There was no cheering, no celebration, only silence. People had lost their homes, their families, and their futures. And yet, amid the destruction, humanity had done the impossible. They had fought back, and they had won. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Captain Maria Vega asked, standing beside him. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over the world. Keller turned to her, his face hard and tired. "I don't know, Maria, but we had no choice. We couldn't let them take everything from us. We fought for our future. We fought because there was nothing left but to fight." Vega nodded, her expression one of quiet understanding. The weight of their decisions hung heavy in the air. Humanity had won, but at what cost? The destruction they had wrought was unimaginable, and the scars of war would remain for generations. Across the globe, survivors began to emerge from their shelters, their eyes filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Some were numb, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. Others were filled with a quiet sense of determination. They had survived. They had withstood the Zalorian onslaught. But what now? Dr. Evelyn Grant, who had spent countless sleepless nights working to undermine the Zalorian command structure, stood in front of a group of scientists and military leaders. She was exhausted, but there was a spark in her Isan unshakable resolve. Despite everything they had lost, despite the horrors they had witnessed, they were still here, and they had one chance to rebuild. "We've won," Dr. Grant said, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. "But our victory doesn't end the war. It's just the beginning of something new. We have to rebuild our world, our society, and our future. And we have to make sure that we never let something like this happen again." Her words echoed through the room, resonating with everyone who heard them. Humanity's victory had been hard won, but it had left behind a broken world. There was no time to mourn. There was only time to act. The leaders of Earth convened, facing a task no one had ever imagined. They had to rebuild not just their cities, but their entire way of life. In the wake of the destruction, a new kind of unity began to take shape. Governments that had once been divided now worked together to ensure the survival of the species. The alien invasion had shown them one thing: humanity was stronger together. But the threat of the Zalorians still loomed large. Though their fleet had been destroyed, there was no guarantee they would never return. Their technology, their knowledge, was still a mystery. Humanity had only just begun to understand the alien forces they had faced. In the months that followed, survivors banded together to rebuild what had been lost. They worked tirelessly to repair the infrastructure, to restore the broken economies, and to heal the psychological wounds left by the invasion. But it wasn't easy. The scars ran deep, and the journey back to normalcy seemed impossible. General Keller, now a symbol of humanity's resistance, was asked to lead the new global defense force. But he knew that this was a task far more daunting than any battle he had ever fought. The real challenge wasn't just defending Earth from another invasion. It was ensuring that humanity never forgot the lesson they had learned. They had to be prepared for anything. There will always be more threats. Keller said in a speech broadcast to every nation, "The Zalorians may be gone, but we've seen the depths of what lies out there. We must be ready to protect our future, no matter the cost." The world's eyes turned to the stars. The skies, once full of fear, now seemed full of possibility. Humanity had faced an enemy far beyond anything they had ever imagined, and they had emerged victorious. But the universe was vast, and as they looked out toward the unknown, humanity knew that this victory was only the beginning of a much larger journey. In the final moments of the battle, when everything had seemed lost, humanity had discovered something incredible. They were capable of far more than anyone had ever believed. They had fought for their survival, and in doing so, they had awakened something within themselves. They had shown the universe that humanity would never back down. The Zalorians had wanted to wipe out humanity. Instead, they had awakened a new strength within Earth's people, one that could never be erased. As Keller watched the sunset over the ruins of what was once a thriving city, he knew one thing for certain: the future was uncertain. But humanity had proven something essential. They would never stop fighting for their place in the stars. And with that, the story of Earth's victory against the Zalorians came to an end. But the story of humanity's rise had only just begun.